Guilty Gear Strive is definitely one of the funnest fighting games I've played in recent times. This game took the franchise even further than it has ever been. Before I go into the lowdown on why the game is good overall, I like to once again take us on a road trip of history to better understand why this is such a big deal within fighting games. More specifically, where Guilty Gear came from and so on. Guilty Gear is one of the several franchises that originally comes from Arc System Works, which was founded and established all in the first half of 1988. They were first named Arco, but later changed to the latter name we know by now. Arc System Works had worked with Sega under contract in the early years, developing games such as the infamous Sailor Moon fighting games, infamous for its broken nature. One of the famous early work they had worked on was a little game called Double Dragon, a beat-em-up that is considered a universal praise by many retro gamers. Also, some more trivia, they co-developed the beat-em-up platformer featuring the King of Pop. Yeah, that's right, Michael Jackson's Moonwalker. Later on, over many years, along with Guilty Gear, they developed more fighting games such as Fist of the North Star, Persona 4 Arena, Blaze Blue, Grand Blue Fantasy Versus, and much more. That is quite the resume, right? Well, there was one other franchise I do want to mention, but I'll bring that up later on in this bit. Guilty Gear itself had its debut in 1998 thanks to the idea conceived from Daisuke Ishiwatari, creator, producer, designer, and composer of Guilty Gear. Ishiwatari had the idea well before joining Arc System Works. After joining, he wanted to create a fighting game in somewhat of a likeness of Street Fighter. After this was approved from the company president at the time, Ishiwatari and dev team, Team Neo Blood, took a year and a half to develop the very first entry simply named Guilty Gear. Along the way, Ishiwatari was able to dip the game into his little melting pot that included his love for Street Fighter, a manga called Bastard, and famously his love for 70s and 80s heavy metal into the mix, which at this point has become an essential part of the Guilty Gear experience. On October 31st of 1998, it was released here in the States and it was a hit, praised for its character designs, visuals, and its unique gameplay amongst fighting games, while that was also its negative, specifically its learning curve, along with its character balance being quite off. Either way, it was one of the few games not from Capcom or SNK that was able to leave an impact for the fighting game fans during the early era. With that, it became a cult classic amongst video games. Because of the anime majority of the visual direction of their fighting games, Arc System Works became to be known to produce the anime fighting games, a subgenre within the fighting game community, along with other game companies. Arc System Works was able to continue becoming relevant in the West thanks to a certain localization and publishing company here in my hometown, Torrance, California, and that is Access Games, which by coincidence bears a similarity to the nickname ArcSys from the company at hand. Their work has continued on ever since Guilty Gear Accent Core. Over the years, the franchise has gone through a number of sequels and several spin-offs. Then came Guilty Gear Xrd.
なまってねえだろうな。上等だ。
Guilty Gear Xrd is something I personally considered a breakthrough in fighting game visuals. In midst of the popularity of 3D models in 2D games, this meant that the charming 2D sprites were, for the most part, a thing of the past. Arc System Works was able to creatively meet the middle ground by utilizing the ever-praised Unreal Engine 3. They were able to produce something visually striking that not only looks modern and cool in the eyes of the general gaming public, but it was able to give off that charm that 2D sprites had in the past. It was almost like 3D anime. Along with the gameplay uniqueness this game had to offer, this was a huge selling point for gamers and in a sense became yet another signature that fans love to look forward to when it comes to Arc System Works fighting games. Thanks to the overwhelming praise in the art direction featured in Xrd, they had the green light in working on a certain fighting game called Dragon Ball FighterZ. This took Arc Sys even further in terms of public eyes. Thanks to the ever so huge popularity and love for the Dragon Ball franchise, FighterZ was a massive success in terms of sales alone. With that, Arc Sys was able to be on the radar for many more people, which was a contributing factor to the marketing success of Guilty Gear Strive.
Today's video, we're going to talk about Guilty Gear Strive.
Guilty Gear Strive. Guilty Gear Strive.
Guilty Gear Strive.
Of Strive.
Strive, bro.
Do you have any thoughts about how you are going to prepare for that kind of extremely talent-dense tournament again?
Nah, I'm going to just play Guilty Gear.
And so, here we are with Guilty Gear Strive. Not only the sales have been better as a whole for Guilty Gear, but the game itself as a package is pretty solid. Why, you ask? Well, let's go over the positives as a fighting game. Mind you that I did play this on the PlayStation 5 just to clarify things. The visuals alone had something to be behold once more. We never thought that the cel-shaded graphics couldn't improve drastically, and this was for the most part what future Arc System Works fighting games was going to look like, and yet here we are. Arc System Works has done it again, creating such eye candy for the players. This was already featuring more robust detailing and striking changes to the characters that we come to know and love, especially for someone like Faust. It overall feels more mature, and so it feels like the art direction grew for the better with that in mind. This is further complemented by the cinematics that have been implemented into the attacks. Even the stages do look visually pleasing, although at some cost for gameplay conveniences, if you know what I'm saying. However, setting that aside, the graphics and the art direction alone absolutely deserves a 10 out of 10. It just looks so cool. Along with the awesome graphics comes with the sounds and the music from yours truly, Guilty Gear. Of course, it's that zany, cheesy, heavy metal type of music that we've always heard in Guilty Gear games, and this is no exception. Now with that said, I think it actually further complements the more mature direction that this Guilty Gear is taking, so I definitely do think it's pretty good as a whole. It is worth mentioning that there is a variety in the soundtrack, so it's not always just heavy metal. The sound effects are definitely something worth mentioning here. Remember that word robust? It definitely feels like that here with these sound effects. Let's not forget the counter sound effect.
Duel 1. Let's rock. Counter.
Of course, the gameplay, very important in fighting games. Here in Strive, once again, took the more accessible direction like many other games have been taking nowadays, which was something the hardcore hated hearing at first, because they usually think it becomes this brain dead, easy for casuals, so it kills the satisfaction of learning stuff. But once people got their hands on the final product, that went away mostly. You see, they refine the core mechanics of the game, and it results something that I personally can get into more because of this Guilty Gear is just easier to understand, especially with the Roman canceling, which is essential for each character in their own right. Now, I'm not going to go over every nook and cranny of how Guilty Gear works, but just know that Guilty Gear comes from a more technical background, unlike other fighting games, and was hard to understand, and Strive here does a pretty good job ironing out that problem, at least more ways than one. Fighting games have this little infamy of having subpar explanations of the core aspects of their own game, which that could be of a video of its own. Well, basically Strive does a really good job in comparison to others, showing the player of what's happening on the screen and sort of why, why, kind of like the huge counter, for example. I think even the infamous amount of damage this game has is a sort of like visual indicator to help understand said core aspects. So with that, it becomes really cool and very satisfying once you do get the feel of the game. For me, it feels really good whenever I catch people in the air with that heavenly pop buster or the heat knuckle.
Slap. 作戦に支障はない。
Now, is it absolutely easy to get into Strive? It's a fighting game, so not quite. But in comparison to others, it is quite easier to absorb and sort of digest the information that you're taking in as you're playing the game. Now, it is Guilty Gear, so it does have some harder inputs to, sort of remember, but another way to put it is that you have less to worry about, so you can focus on these aspects of the game first, and so on and so forth, at least to some degree. At the very least, they offer you a robust tutorial mode for you to learn about the game. Naturally, you'll spend a lot of good time in training mode as you lab your combos and practice with your setups with whatever character. At least there, they have a lot of the necessary tools for you to help with your needs. Also surprisingly, this Guilty Gear, despite that accessibility tag slapped in there, actually lets you be pretty expressive for each character of how you execute your game plan on screen. Whether how you approach or how you do your combos and such with each character. That of course comes with a lot of practicing within the game for a certain amount of time. But this all adds to that satisfying experience that Strive really does a good job with. Even with the short time I've put into my Potemkin, I've done some pretty satisfying things myself.
48の必殺技驚きます。当選を
Most importantly nowadays for fighting games is the online netcode when fighting with opponents across the net. The rollback netcode here is perhaps the biggest highlight Strive has under its belt. You see, you can have everything firing on all cylinders, such as the character designs, graphics, the core gameplay mechanics, soundtrack, and so on. But if all that time you put into the training lab does not translate well to crappy netcode, you're likely going to be demotivated after wasting all that time, which has been a common occurrence across many modern fighting games, at least the major ones anyway. Most of the times in Strive, it feels very close to an offline experience. But of course it's not perfect, but in comparison to other fighting games, it's a godsend. This means that the time you put into practicing your combos and setups with your characters is going to mostly pay off when you fight opponents in online matches. This is especially important for the FGC with the shift in direction regarding to online versus offline thanks to the pandemic. This can pave the road for not only a more robust online experience, competitive or not, but this can also mean that the other companies will consider prioritizing good net play in their future fighting games, and thus the fighting game genre can flourish more than ever. However, with all that said, the online experience, while it can be said its biggest highlight, it's also considered its biggest downfall here. Specifically, getting to the online fights is some of the most painful experiences I've ever had in any online fighting game. The very source of this whole painful experience is within the lobby system.
So I can actually do this beforehand. Okay, so now, Regis, go ahead and challenge him. Unable to queue maximum number of matches played. What the What the
First off, I definitely cannot say I like the look of the lobby system, but that's not the really big elephant in the room here. It's the function. When stuff doesn't work, that's where my frustrations become the forefront of my emotions and feelings. So the process goes like this. You get on a station with one other person and initiate the match and ready up. But before that, you have to make sure you have the right character and the stage settings selected, and then you can proceed. Oh, but wait, You have to wait for other people to set in the line before you can start the match so they can properly spectate. Now when it's just you and your friend, or your one other friend, then it's a little easier. A little bit. But there are so many problems to be had in this here lobby system. You and the rest of your folks are just teleporting all over the place at many times before any of you can reach to the station. There are also times where you can get kicked or get stuck on that station. I mean, for the love of justice, the devs actually implemented a button for the sole purpose of kicking that person off the station by drop kicking. Yeah, I'm dead fucking serious. Rather than fixing the problems of the lobby, they did that. Now, understandably, the COVID-19 has made production of many things difficult, especially for fighting games that require testing and other nuances that otherwise were present when things were normal. Even after delaying the game's release from May 2020 to April 2021, and then again to June 2021, not to mention the 2 beta tests during those times, the lobby system is still quite broken. There are inconveniences such as not being able to access the character and stage select screen before each match. You still have to do that outside the station or the line or whatever, which is still common in other fighting games, modern ones too especially, which I still do not understand why they do this. It has become one of my biggest pet peeves within fighting games. Just allow us to select each time, which would mean that no one has to back out in case they want to change their characters and trying to get back into the line while suffering all the teleporting and the lag that you commonly see in this here lobby system. It makes me wonder why or how this all happened. The lobby systems in other ArcSys games have functioned just fine at the time, although those games were using the delayed base netcode when you're on the fighting side of things. Here, it's such a damn shame because Strive has such a great core fighting game experience and netcode during the actual matches, but that lobby system is such a rough bump on the road getting there that can put off the motivation or mood to play, which has happened with people within my circle. There is one more thing I must mention when it comes to the online experience. Yeah, I'm dead fucking serious. This happens when you want to go in and out of certain menus. God, why? Ugh. This lobby system is essentially the #1 thing they absolutely need to fix before anything else, really. I really don't care about the whole character balance at this point, at least for right now. I just want that damn thing to be fixed first. Now, speaking of the characters, the roster size can be looked at as a negative, as it appears to be small in some people's eyes, especially for those who are very casual with fighting games. I think this is a pretty decent size for you to start with, as you're better off learning this many matchups rather than something like this to start off with. On top of that, for the Guilty Gear fans, there is no insta-kill mechanic here, which is, I think, a first within any Guilty Gear game, really. Probably due to time constraints and all the time they put into their animations. Perhaps this is something they'll add later in a big update. Other than that, that's really all there is to address for the important bits. The game does offer an arcade mode and a story mode, which is essentially like a Netflix type of anime that you can just sit back and binge on it in one day. It was entertaining at best, but for something those who love the lore of Guilty Gear, you're definitely in for a crazy ride. What I liked about this story mode is that Strive allows you to look up any information or anything story related really in order to help understand what's going on your screen. There's actually like a big backlog so you can like catch up on the lore from there. You can even do that mid story mode, which is actually pretty cool. The other complaint I do have is the unlocking slash collecting aspect of things. It's a little lackluster here, and I just do wish that you can just dump all your in-game gold at once to get all my goodies instead of just like doing the 10 rolls every single time. There's also the severe lack of costumes within the game in comparison to other fighting games. That's because they are essentially one single mold. 3D modelers will probably know what I'm talking about, but imagine like a $200 anime figure. Yeah, it looks fantastic in details, but you can't really pose them or do really anything else really. Here, this 3D art style allows for the animators and artists to actually animate the clothing and hair and other certain parts to their liking, which is why GT Strive animates very beautifully. But meanwhile, games like Street Fighter V rely on the engine itself to animate the physics, which is why something like Bison's cape or the skirts of every female fighter or other certain parts really go crazy depending on conditions like a lot of shimmying back and forth or rapid movement really, but because their costumes are made on a separate sort of layer and they use the physics of the engine and stuff like that, they allow for new costumes available for unlocking or purchase. So back here in Guilty Gear, if you want to see a new costume for a Soul Bad Guy, for example, the staff would have to technically make a brand new Soul Bad Guy with that different outfit, which is very reminiscent of the pixel sprites. While they're both very beautiful and charming in their own right, they can't provide that long sustaining income like Street Fighter does with their numerous costumes. But for me, I can live without the costumes in this game because this game is just so beautifully handcrafted with its animations. I think that's a price worth paying for. So ultimately, Guilty Gear Strive is a great fighting game package that has a pretty bright future for the fighting game fans and the related communities. It is safe to say that this is one of the biggest turning points for fighting games in general with just the online netcode alone. I just hope that they fix that godforsaken lobby system sometime down the road. I think, in my opinion, that should be their biggest priority, really. I also hope for them to just go with the basic lobby system in the future that has all the essential functions like MVCI or Street Fighter V in their future fighting games. Otherwise, the essentials for a fantastic looking, fun, and satisfying fighting game is pretty much all there. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and give this a 7 out of 10. A solid 7 out of 10, really. This is a great, fantastic fighting game that is severely, unfortunately, held back by its awkward and broken lobby system. While ambitious, yeah, I'll give it that, but it's super broken. So that is my review for Guilty Gear Strive. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I hope to see any comments in the comment section below about Guilty Gear Strive. What do you guys think of it? Do you guys think it's one of the greatest fighting games within the recent times? What things they should fix and stuff like that? Do you guys like the lobby system or the look of the lobby system, I should say? All those comments, something like that, are welcome down below. Don't forget to like and subscribe, all that fun stuff, because it really helps out. So I really highly appreciate it, guys. So again, thank you guys for tuning in for my review for Guilty Gear Strive. It does definitely have a pretty bright future. In terms of DLC alone, I think it's looking pretty cool because they just announced Gold Lewis Dickinson, and he already looks pretty cool himself. So I'm gonna definitely try him out, and hopefully the same sort of feeling goes across the rest of the DLC within that roadmap. So there is going to be more of that story mode and all that. So this DLC pass is pretty looking promising and fun to look forward to. So let's hope for a bright future for Guilty Gear Strive. So on that note, thank you guys so much. I'll see you guys in the next video. Sean out.